We're about to begin another episode of High Dive with Lee Stranahan. And Lee, welcome to the show. It's a busy career being a journalist, an independent journalist there in Washington, D.C. We're lucky to catch you here on not even the break, but dinner time. How are you tonight, Lee?
I'm good, thanks, Jason. Bon appetit.
You're having some, what have you got there? Is it potbelly soup?
Potbelly soup.
They have that place in New York
Dinner
as
of
well.
Champions.
Yeah.
It's right around the corner from here, so I can walk to it without even crossing the street. Fantastic.
That is good. These are the types of things that city dwellers concern themselves with. But tonight, Lee, we're going to be talking about the really interesting topic. I mean, to say that the Democrat Party is imploding, it's somewhat of an understatement. I mean, their ridiculous Russiagate hoax failed. Their Ukraine-gate hoax failed. Their attempt to impeach the rightfully elected 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump, failed. Last night at the State of the Union, which I want to get your opinion of, but I personally found epic, Nancy Pelosi exhibited such bad behavior. You could have put a 14-year-old up there and the temper tantrum might have been a little bit less profound. What do you think about all that?
Where would you like me to start?
You said wherever you like.
Well, okay, let me start with the State of the Union. Let me start with my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm going to name two people that we know, but most people don't know them. But you'll get this story. I was at a party once, and across the room, I saw an attractive woman, Kiki Stockhammer, someone we both know.
Yes.
And I think that's who I was looking at, Kiki Stockhammer. I think it was Kiki. Kiki was the old spokesmodel for New Tech, the company that Jason and I worked with. And I was sitting next to my friend John Gross. And for the purposes of our story, it's important to note that John is gay. And so I was just being a guy, right? And I was like, man, she looks good. And John said, yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, which I thought was a great line. And that's what I felt about the State of the Union. If you're into that kind of thing, it might have been okay. For me, I am not into that kind of thing. The State of the Union has a very, and it's got a rhythm. The speech is going to be like this. It's going to be very ponderous. The person is going to speak slowly. Occasionally, people in half the room will applaud. Then he'll say, that's why we have in the audience somebody who's representative of the thing that I'm talking about. And they're with a child.
Right.
And then blah, 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 blah. That's the way every fucking State of the Union speech goes, right? And they all go that way. Yeah. And the only difference is the content. Like one will be a civil rights hero and the other will be, I guess, last night, a civil rights hero, a Tuskegee Airman, which I found very interesting. That was the thing I noted most about it. It was mostly, that was what I would call standard Republican speech. I did this on a Periscope earlier. I asked people, would you have rather had Donald Trump talk about prayer in school as a First Amendment issue, since he's only going to talk about a First Amendment issue apparently for about 20 seconds, because that's all. He gave it less than a minute. First Amendment got less than a minute. And I said, you, only Trump supporters, answer this question. Would you have rather had him talk about prayer in school or the way tech companies are censoring conservative voices? And almost everyone, about 75%, said the tech companies. Right? I think everyone agrees to that. I said, would you rather had him say what he said, which is, I will never shut down Social Security, or would you have rather had him say, I'm going to pardon Roger Stone, right? Blah, blah, blah. Or would you rather have him pardon Roger Stone?
Which would you prefer, Roger Stone or
Guaido?
Social Security? Roger Stone is one guy who made his own bed and he's lying in it. I don't think he... Really?
Yeah, no, and here's what it is. They would rather, and again, I'm not saying he has to get rid of Social Security. He went out of his way to make a very, in my opinion, non-Republican statement, which is, I will never get rid of Social Security. I don't need you to promise. I did not vote for Donald Trump to say, I will protect some government program at no matter what the cost. Like, I guess I'm not trying to get rid of Social Security right now. Who's even talking about that? So it's a complete pandering statement. The only people who might be talking about that would be libertarians. Nobody else is talking about getting rid of Social Security. Certainly not the Democrats. They want to make it bigger. So why is he making that point? That's why I say, to me, it was a very standard Republican speech. That's blowhardiness. No one cares about that. They want to see Hillary locked up. They want to see more than 3 miles of the wall built, which we don't have. That's what they want to see. Now, he was mostly paying to the Republican establishment base, but there was one notable group he was reaching out to, and that was Black Americans. And I talked to some Black Americans this morning who noticed the same thing. And last night here at Sputnik, very obvious. He's got the highest approval rating among Black Americans of any recent Republican ever, like in a long time. And probably Ike. I mean, and maybe not even then. So highest approval ratings.
Well, what was the response from the Black people you were speaking to? Did they like the speech or dislike the speech?
They hated it, but they're very left. So he was very unlikely to say anything that they agreed with.
Oh, it was Garland.
Right. So they viewed it. What's that?
Was Garland?
Oh, no, way to the left of Garland.
Who was it?
Way to the left of Garland. Jackie Lukeman and Jamal Thomas and Sean Blackman, I think, was in the conversation a little bit. They're like socialists. They're like very Jamal's not. Sean's a socialist leader, and but they didn't like it. But whatever, they got that that was the group he was appealing to. He wasn't appealing to much of anybody else outside the base, really. But he wasn't really appealing to his base. His base did not vote for them. So most people I know, if you pressed them, they'd say they don't like socialism, so they prefer. Or is this guy? By the way, Guaido is a socialist, but whatever. Socialist.
That was weird that he was there, wasn't it?
We don't.
Wasn't it weird that he said that Guaido was the rightful ruler of Venezuela?
Yes, if you slowed down. But I thought the speech was, if you're into that kind of thing, it was done well. Like, I don't agree with the Soleimani assassination at all. I think he mischaracterized who Soleimani is. Soleimani fought ISIS. The U.S. supports ISIS. I've known this since 2013. The Trump base does not largely know that Trump has carried on or made worse every bad thing that Obama was doing in Syria, where he was supporting Al-Qaeda, we're supporting the Sunni extremist, real terrorist. And a guy like Soleimani stopped ISIS. He was fighting ISIS 100%. The U.S. thinks we're fighting ISIS. We're supporting ISIS and have been since in the Trump administration. And again, if you didn't know that, and you would have no reason to know that from the conservative media, you'd have no reason to know that from the mainstream media. They didn't report it under Obama, so they haven't changed now. They just don't report it. But I know it to be a fact. So when I talk to people, and sometimes some very well-meaning, smart people, who are like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, I know, I understand. The U.S. is supporting Al-Qaeda. And they go, well, that can't, what? And that can't be, because we're fighting. Because they go, well, I heard Pompeo. And I'm like, okay, but go look at this. Look who this group is. Look who any of these groups, Ansar al-Sharia or al-Shabaab or in al-Nusra in Syria, they're all Sunni Wahhabist fundamentalist Salafi groups. And that's the religion of Saudi Arabia. And it confuses them. Or you mentioned the MEK, which is the Marxist. Do you know about the MEK?
Well, you've told me about it, yes. And
do you know the
John
MEK
McCain and Rudy Giuliani were hanging out with them.
And Bolton, big paid. It's the Marxist jihadist cult. All you have to do is look up MEK flag. The flag makes it pretty damn clear what this group represents, yet Giuliani supporting them. And you can find video on YouTube of him at their Bulgarian compound, because it is a cult. There's a flag right there. What is that? I mean, you got to admit, in terms of honesty and logos, if I told you, hey, Jason, I've got a Marxist jihadist cult. Can you design a logo for it? That is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
right? That's not subtle. It's not like a squiggle. And you go, oh, that represents our our inner Marxist jihadist. No, you got the hammer, you got the sickle, you got the rifle, you got the crescent. It's great. It's a Marxist. That's the group that Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton and Bill Richardson and Howard Dean support. That's the group they want to take over Iran. Do you want a group with that flag taking over anything?
No.
Anything?
Nope.
Right. So
yeah, no, this is not, doesn't look like a group that I could get behind. You know, Lee, just to interject, I should let everybody know.
MAGA.
No. You and I are going to be doing the next episode of our still relatively new series, High Dive with Lee Stranahan. It's coming up in just about 18 minutes on patreon.com/Stranahan, as well as patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I want people to know about that because we've been covering some really important stuff on that show. We called it High Dive because it's daring, it's bold, you jump up and go deep, and we've been going deep on some of these stories. It's amazing, Lee, because everything you're saying makes sense. It's always documented. We've seen the videos of Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton hanging out with these MEK guys, but it's very hard for me to kind of like, to reconcile that in my mind when I've been watching Rudy Giuliani's podcast about common sense, and he's dealing with facts and evidence having to do with Shokin, the prosecutor who was fired. He's bringing sense and logic to the table. So what the hell is going on exactly?
Well, I enjoy the power of pushing on people's limited hangouts. So as you know, and as anybody who follows my work knows, and you maybe know my work, but I've been talking about the DNC Ukraine story for 3 years. 2 years before John Solomon, 2 years, a good 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've done hundreds of episodes of a radio show where we talked about it almost every day. And I also have developed the comprehensive theory on what actually happened with Russiagate. And it goes back to the ultra short version. It goes to the people closest to the Clintons, people like Strobe Talbot, people like Cody Shearer, that nobody talks about. Tom Fitton just talked about this stuff for the first time. And it may not be a coincidence. And but it's people like Cody Shearer, people like Strobe Talbot, people like Derek Shearer, people like Khodorkovsky, people like Bill Browder, who are not part of the central narrative, because what you'll find is, and and we've shown this before, I'll give one simple example. The Trump Tower meeting was about the Magnitsky Act, right? Nobody actually disputes that. That's what it was about, this anti-Russian sanctions bill that can be used against any country, but leave that aside. That's what it was about. Now, Fox News, they're owned by News Corp. That's Rupert Murdoch's company, right? Again, not anything tricky there. If you go to opensecrets.org and you look for the Magnitsky Act and you see who funded the lobbying to support it, News Corp. I'm going to say that again. Rupert Murdoch's company paid for lobbying to support the Magnitsky Act. So this raises an interesting journalistic question, which is, when they were reporting in the Trump Tower meeting, did they ever reveal that they actually had an interest, a biased interest? You follow me? And this is the thing, because I work for Sputnik, I work for Russian-funded media. The name's Sputnik, and we're very clear we're Russian-funded media. But if you didn't know it was Russian-funded media, and I was saying certain things, and suddenly you found out, you might go, well, wait a second, I kind of wish he'd told me that, because then I would go, okay, well, let me double check that. He's being a little too nice to Putin. Let me double check it. But we're very clear about that. Fox News has never mentioned this. And as I've talked about for a couple of years now, people like Dan Bongino and John Solomon and other people are giving a false narrative. It is true to some extent, but they never mention people like Cody Shearer, Brett Kimberlin, or Derek Shearer, or Bill Browder, who they support.
And they block you when
turn.
You challenge them.
That's right, yes. And so this story, that narrative, is so outside the Democrats' narrative, which is the Russians hacked the Russians hacked the election. and Trump was in on it. And it's different from the Republican narrative, which is the Russians hacked the election and Trump wasn't in on it. But they're both saying Russians hacked the election. Listen to it. You heard Trump's attorney say that during the impeachment. He said, the Russians interfered, but so did Ukraine. Yeah, it's not weird because the whole point of it, that's the point of it. Fox serves, their whole purpose is to take people on the right and to mislead them. But you don't mislead people by disagreeing with them on everything, because then they're never going to follow you at all. You need them to follow you a little bit.
Limited hangout.
And go, oh, yeah, this guy. Right. That's why it's a limited hangout. Yeah. And so this is completely provable. And I'll just go back to this. News Corp paid for lobbying for the Magnitsky Act.
Where do I find that? Because I'm on Open Secrets and I put in Magnitsky Act, but I didn't see that.
Type in Magnitsky. Let me see how you spelled it. Zoom in a little bit. Just get rid of Act. Just do Magnitsky. Oh, you know what? I see you're on the wrong tab, I think.
Site search?
Yeah, do site search. Yeah. And then you'll find it 2012, I forget, I think 603. No, there it is. It's 10 right there. Yes. 1039. Let's see. Okay, clients lobbying.
Heritage
and then keep
Foundation.
Scrolling down.
Abbott Labs.
Heritage, the big concern.
Motorola, News Corp. Yep. There it is.
News Corp. Yep.
Scientology.
So again, yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I mean, what's going on?
Interesting, right?
Here?
ExxonMobil. By the way, why would ExxonMobil lobby for this? Because ExxonMobil was trying to steal Russia's oil assets, and the way they were doing it was the guy who's right at the center of this, Khodorkovsky, who no one ever talks about. You and I've talked about. And people go, well, wait, like if I were to mention Oleg Deripaska, everybody who follows politics knows that name. They don't know Khodorkovsky. He's the guy right at the center of this. He was the richest guy in Russia. And if you don't doubt he's at the center of this major political scandal, I tell people, go look up Senate Resolution 322. It's an act in favor of Khodorkovsky. One sponsor, Joe Biden. Two co-sponsors, Obama and McCain, the two guys who would run for president in a couple of years. So I'll say that again. One sponsor, Joe Biden, for this Russian oligarch criminal. And you've not ever heard a single solitary story about it ever. Nobody's reporting that. And the reason is that Khodorkovsky was trying to sell the oil assets that he'd acquired to the West, to ExxonMobil. And the Magnitsky Act is a way for Khodorkovsky to try to get back in power. This is the guy who paid $6 million in lobbying. He's a Russian national in exile, I believe in England. He could be in Switzerland or someplace, but he's in exile, but he's got billions of dollars. He partners with Soros. He funded the place Alexander Chalupa took the journalists to, and so on and so forth. This is the guy right at the center of this. You won't find one story, but every aspect of it's provable. And you go, well, but he's not important. He was supported by Biden, McCain, and Obama. 3 of the 4 people. If he'd been supported by Sarah Palin, it would have been everybody running for president. But he wasn't. But McCain tried because the lobbying firm that also supports him, McCain, and who works with Soros, McCain hooked Sarah Palin up with that lobbying firm, with that PR firm. And then when it came out they were Soros connected, because she's got some integrity, and she does, dropped them. Said, I don't want to have anything to do with them. They're Soros funded. But that's what's going on. And so this is the true story.
Very quickly, and one slight correction. There's nobody talking about it. You and I speak about it and have spoken about it on High Dive with Lee Stranahan. We're going to be starting there in just 10 minutes. So I want to put a pause on you for a second and give everybody a chance to join us over on Patreon and Subscribestar. We'll be resuming in just 10 minutes, and we're going to go deep on this Khodorkovsky subject. everything with the Magnitsky Act, Ukraine, what's going to happen now that the impeachment trial has ended. And so I hope that people will join us. You're going to hear stuff that Fox News, Dan Bongino, some of these other people don't want to talk about. Rise Above tells us that Bongino has mentioned some of this stuff, but he does not talk about Bill Browder. He's mentioned Cody Shearer, but people can join us in just 10 minutes.
He's never mentioned Kimberlin. He in neither of his books, he does not mention Khodorkovsky, period. He does not mention Khodorkovsky in either of his books. If you have a page number, I have them both on Kindle. I'll look it up, but I've gone through both his books. He's pro Bill Browder, as is Glenn Beck, as is everybody on Fox, as is Sarah Carter, right? And you can't be pro Trump and pro Browder,
right?
If to the extent you're pro Browder, you're anti-Trump.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm saying about Fox. And they lobbied for the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act, by the way, is a horrible unconstitutional law. It says if the Secretary of State, in this case, Skull and Bones member Stephen Mnuchin, forgive me, if the Treasury Secretary, in this case, Skull and Bones member Stephen Mnuchin, and the Secretary of State, in this case, former CIA Director Big Fat Mike Pompeo, if those two guys agree, they will sanction you. What?
Yeah.
There's no trial. There's no evidentiary standard. There's nothing except these two guys, one of whom is a member of a secret society where people lay in a coffin naked and tell their sexual secrets to each other. So they have mutual blackmail and are told, if you ever have a choice between hiring two people, hire the bonesman. You have to hire the bonesman. Yeah. Or, hey, you laid in a coffin naked and told us your sexual secrets. That's real. And Mnuchin's part of it. And he was business partners with George Soros. And a lot of Trump supporters don't seem to know that Mnuchin, not just worked with him, was literally business partners with George Soros.
How does Trump not know that?
Because how do Trump supporters not know that? Or Mnuchin's got a good excuse, well, you don't know what it's like, and or he's not that bad, we got out of that, and I blah blah blah. But I know what's going on, and the thing is, Trump does too. Khodorkovsky said in an interview after the election, he described Trump as being sort of the head of what he called the alt elite, and he's right. Trump is not a bonesman. He's not one of those like old school elite people. He's kind of a wannabe, right? He's like second tier, but he's not really part of that Bohemian Grove set. Even on the Epstein thing, he made the mistake of turning over on Epstein as opposed to going along with it, which is part of the reason I think he's targeted more than anybody else on the Epstein thing, because he did cooperate with the authorities. And I think that's set them up. And I think that, and it's clear, that Jared Kushner is the single worst influence on Trump. And he's got all of those connections. And so anyway, it's really an alternative, I would say, worldview, but it's all real and it's all provable. But it's so far out that if people listen to me once a week and then go listen to Fox the rest of the week, it's going to be very confusing. Yeah. Because they're going to hear me say stuff and they're going to go, well, but huh? That's not what, but I like Hannity or whatever. Right. I like Bongino. And they'll go, oh, well, Bongino, you seem to agree. And I'm like, no. He agrees on the stuff he has to, but he's protecting the Clintons. And people go, oh, he doesn't like the Clintons at all because he says he doesn't. And I'm like, well, apparently you've never been lied to before, because that's how people lie to you.
Yeah.
They don't tell you. I mean, I don't, like I say, I just don't understand it. They must have had only great relationships or something.
We've got to transition over to our sponsor exclusive show on Patreon and Subscribestar. Okay. And we've got just 5 minutes until that begins. So we're going to resume the conversation. Please join us there. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great night.